Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and drop us a comment in the comment section and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you.
What I want to look at first of all is the Putin-Trump meeting, and look at the background and look at the foreground of that meeting, which took place a week ago, didn't it, in Ankara. And then we'll turn and look at Israel and look at the Israel, Gaza, Palestine, again looking at the background, looking at the foreground. And then finally, warnings for the Ecclesia. Had the meeting between Putin met with Trump in Ankara last Saturday. Putin was the guest, but he seemed to be in control of the situation. So just some background to those talks. Putin had seen that Europe was a paper tiger. Ever since he had invaded Crimea in 2014, he'd seen that the sanctions that were threatened to be placed on him never became a reality. Europe was totally divided, and NATO was very weak. And this was so apparent to him that he could ignore both NATO and Europe. In fact, just a little aside, Germany a few years ago was on a NATO exercise in Europe. And they were so unprepared that they hadn't got enough rifles for all the military, and they had to issue them with broomsticks to represent rifles. So it just shows how unprepared Europe is for any warfare, and that will have great significance, I think, in the near future. Now, Putin models himself on Peter the Great. And in June, he issued his 10-year plan of what he was going to set out and do. And one of the things that Peter the Great did was to modernize the state so that it made it much more efficient. And the Daily Telegraph had this quite helpful map showing the areas in the southwest of Ukraine that Putin is making great efforts to take over and conquer. And it's shown on the map there, and we'll look at a larger version of that in a moment. He models himself, as I say, or wants to model himself on the first Vladimir. Vladimir the First was, or Vladimir the Great as he was known, was the Grand Prince of Kiev and the first Christian ruler in the Kievan Rus. And as we read there, his military conquests consolidated the provinces of Kiev and Novgorod into a single state. And his Byzantine baptism determined the course of Christianity in the region. So this is a man that he looks to model himself on, this Vladimir the First. And his name obviously is Vladimir, so he wants to be Vladimir the Second or Third. What Vladimir the First did was to send ambassadors to examine all the religions. So examine the Roman Catholic Church and what they taught. He examined what the Muslims taught. He examined what the Jews taught. And he examined the Eastern Orthodox religions. And when he came to Constantinople, he was most impressed with the Christian cathedrals, absolutely dripping with gold. And so he had a smaller version of St. Sophia, which was in Constantinople, built in his capital in Kiev. And he was the one that ordered his people to become Christians after the manner of the Orthodox religion. And the River Dnieper, which is one of those rivers that traverses Ukraine, it was into this river that he baptized his people. Now, obviously, there were no press there to tell us what happened, because this is an incident that happened long time ago. But this is a painting of somebody in the last century. But how accurate it is, we don't know. But there's no doubt that he did make all he himself was baptized into the Orthodox religion and made all his followers in what was originally Ukraine, baptized them in the river. And so this was an important step as far as Russia was concerned, because this was the origin of the Russian Orthodox Church religion. So this was, to Putin, this was a very important event. The transition from paganism to Christianity. Now, quite a few years ago, Brother John Ramsden, I think many of you will know him, is now resident at Eden House, so I see him every day. He was on our guided tour, and they ended up outside the Kremlin. And the official church of the Kremlin is this magnificent cathedral, and above on the domes, because this is the thing about Eastern churches, you don't have steeples, you have domes. And on the inside of the dome, you have very elaborate paintings, usually of heavenly pictures with all sorts of angels and that there. But this is characteristic of the Eastern churches, domes, not steeples. And above them was this cross and a crescent. And tongue-in-cheek, he asked the guide, "Now, what does that mean?" And the guide was quite open. It celebrates when we will conquer the Muslim power. So the cross will be dominant over the Muslim crescent moon. Now, there are people that say, give alternative ideas to that, but it does seem quite reasonable. So again, this is something in Putin's mind that he wants to conquer. He wants to expand his empire, as happened in the past. Now, when Putin came to power in 1991, wasn't it? No, it was later than that when he became president. It must have been 2001. When he came to power, his right-hand man was Medvedev, which is the gentleman to his right. And he carried out Putin's dirty work, because Putin at that time was mayor of Moscow, and there were a lot of things that he wanted to change, and Medvedev was the man who, as I say, did his dirty work for him. Now, Putin came to power to be president, as I say, must have been 2004. One could only serve for 2 terms. That was the law at the time. So when he had finished his 2 terms, he installed Medvedev as the president, and it was Medvedev that altered the existing law that said you could only rule for 2 terms, and made it you could operate for 20 years. And then at the end of that term, he then stepped down. Putin came in, and he's got 20 years. He's done quite a lot of those years. He's getting an old man now. And then Medvedev became prime minister until 1920, when he retired. But Medvedev is an outspoken critic of the West. And he was particularly scathing about Trump very recently sent 2 atomic submarines into the vicinity of Russia. And Medvedev very angrily reminded Trump that if he provoked Moscow, Moscow had weapons that could reach every point in America. So don't provoke us. We can wipe you out if we choose. Now, I'm just going to knock the top heading off for the next few slides. This was on the BBC site on the 17th of August. Don't know what the date is today, 19th, 20th. So 3 days ago. And these are the areas that Russia controls in southwest Ukraine. So from 99% down to or up to 100% of Crimea. And this is important. But this particular region, the southeast region, is very rich in coal. Coal is used to extract the other very abundant material there, which is iron. So it's a very smoky area. These coal furnaces extract the iron ore to get the raw iron. And because you got all this energy there, it is also an area where steel is used to make tractors and heavy pressings. So it's a very rich area which Russia now controls, and Ukraine has lost. But more than that, if your country borders the sea, you then have rights to the maritime border for 12 nautical miles. And if you're a landlubber like I am, 12 nautical miles is nearly 14 miles in our understanding of a mile. So because there's a big border all around Crimea and all around the Sea of Azov, Russia has control of what's under that water. And under that water are vast gas and oil reserves. And of course, this is something that Putin is always interested in having control over gas and oil reserves. So Ukraine has actually lost a vast treasure source because it's now in the hands of Russia. But the other thing that is very binding is language. And this is a map showing, from 86%, 46%, 82%, and then as you go westward, you get 24% and 3%. Again, thanks to the BBC, 17th. And religion is a very binding power because, of course, Russia is Russian-speaking, and there is a strong affinity for fellow Russian speakers. We have to remember that there is no freedom of the press in Russia. There are papers, Moscow Times and others like that, but they're all under the control of the government. So they're all government run. They're told what to put, and they daren't step out of line. One of the great things that Russia pushes is the decadence of the West. And I'm afraid we can't really disagree, can we? I think the West is very decadent. So Russia is saying, we are the people that are the bulwark against this evil system in the West with its democracy and all the troubles that brings. Russians are the people, we are the way forward, we are the strong ones, as it were. So, as I say, it makes a strong affinity from the Russian-speaking people here who believe the same things because they're brainwashed by the Russians. So there's a strong linkage there. Now, in 1991, when the Soviet Union fell, Russia lost about a quarter of its territory, 24% to be precise. So 11 is Russia. All these other numbered spots are countries which it has lost. Now, on a map that's trying to depict a globe on a flat sheet of paper, it doesn't really look like a quarter of the area, but I did find yesterday a globe, and yes, I mean, the yellow areas do look a bit more like 25%, a quarter of their land they have lost. Now, to the Russians, that is a terrible thing, to lose territory. Their whole purpose is to gain territory. And so this is a slight on their psyche. So this is important to Putin, to take as much of Ukraine, which used to be under the control of Russia, and restore things as they were. So we now want to move on to Israel and Gaza, Palestine, looking at background and the foreground. Now, the key to understanding Israeli politics is to understand what left and right is. And I know I've given this talk many times, and you've probably heard it before, but if you haven't heard it, it will help you very much to understand the situation in Israel today, the great battles that are taking place between the left wing and the right wing. So the election that brought Netanyahu to power in 2022 was very right-wing. The previous government had been very left-wing. So in Israel, what does left and right signify? Well, right-wing is Israel is a special religious site, religious state, and everything should be run to do that which will help the religious power. So on Shabbat, no buses running, things like that. That's what the right wing wants. And that is so hated by the left wing, because the left wing says, no, Israel's just an ordinary country, just like any other country. We don't want all these rules and regulations. These, the left wing, in the main, are the non-religious people. So the fact that in the elections, 65% of the Israeli population voted against the left wing and wanted a right wing was a big step forward. Now, the left wing, as I say, believes that Israel is a secular, non-religious state. The right wing says, no, it wants to be run, taking in effect our religious beliefs. Now, the problem is that the vocal minority in Israel are the left wing, the non-religious in the main people, and they have money from not only Israel, but much money pours in from the States, where there is a strong movement of Jews who are secular, don't believe in a God, and they want Israel to become left-wing again. And they are excellent at organising things. This is their ability. And because the left wing hates Netanyahu and wants him out of power, they will latch on to any cause that is currently going that might possibly end up with Netanyahu being overthrown. And it did look as if they were going to succeed, but as we shall see, that wasn't God's plan and purpose. Well, the right wing are just ordinary Israelis. So, yeah, don't take the picture yet. 2 more slides. Are not well organised. They're just the ordinary Israeli people. And the other problem is that the left wing are people in power. There are many politicians, left wing. the Supreme Court, which organises what can be done and what can't be done. They're all left-wing. It's a totally left-wing organisation. And even many of the military leaders are left-wing. And Netanyahu has had to battle with those, as we shall see. Whereas, as I say, the right-wing are just the ordinary Israelis. So let's just look at this in a bit more detail. So, as I say, the protesters in the main, you see the demonstrations, the BBC will show them every night. The protesters blocking the streets, lighting fires and stopping the traffic and that. These are the mainly left-wing people. And as I say, what they want to do is to get rid, by any means they can, of Netanyahu. So this is the bandwagon that they have jumped on in recent times. So latching onto any deaths in Gaza is a very emotive subject in Israel and for the Israelis. And so there's a lot of pressure on the Israeli government to stop the war in Gaza. And yet they ignore the fact that it wasn't Israel that started it, it was Hamas. Hamas is the one who could instantly let all the prisoners go and solve all the problems. But no, that doesn't suit their agenda because that won't get Netanyahu out. So they back the protesters who make it as if it's all Netanyahu's fault that there are so many problems in Gaza and the hostages haven't been released. Now, if the BBC was your main news source, you'll be daily bombarded with very biased news. They jump in on every story about the terrible treatment by Israel of the Palestinians in Gaza. And over the weekend, on Sunday, they put out a little correction. They had previously shown this lady who, a Gazan, who was taken to Italy for treatment, and she was a picture of this very emaciated lady, which of course was caused by the problem of Israel not letting food into Gaza. Well, the correction was to say, we have now found out that that lady was very ill. In fact, I think she got leukemia. And so we're very pleased to correct this. But you see, the trouble is done. People have seen that picture of this lady in the hospital in Italy looking absolutely skeletal. The fact that a few days later, today, they put a correction won't be seen by anybody. As I say, the damage is done. And I think she died, didn't she, at the weekend? Yes. So, the BBC's response to all of this is, well, if Israel would let our reporters into Gaza, then we could tell you the truth, because we would have found out that this lady had cancer, but we weren't allowed in. Well, the simple reason Israel doesn't let them in, that Israel doesn't control what goes on in the press in Gaza. It's Hamas that controls it. And every reporter has his Hamas minder. And woe betide if you don't obey what you're told. And so they're told when to switch the cameras on and when to switch them off. And as I say, it's more than your job is worth and could be your life. There have been instances of reporters being beaten up by Hamas because they disobeyed orders. So everybody has their minder, and Hamas has a publicity wing which sets up all these shots. And I don't know whether you've ever realised that when you look at a picture from the BBC and many other news sources, how staged they look. This particular one, I should have put a picture on, but it was this evening time. You could see all these buildings, many of them in ruins, rubble on the street. And there was this, the one picture that actually sticks in my mind was 2.5 weeks ago. There was this lady, bright clothing, always got bright clothing, just attracts the eye. And she was carrying her dead child. Now, this child was supposed to have been pulled out the rubble, but her clothes are totally clean. Now, I just happened to enlarge this picture, and I saw that this child, which was just hanging limply and its head hanging down, his eyes were open and he was smiling. So it was very quickly removed before I had a chance. I didn't realise that they were going to remove it so quickly, so I can't bring it. But that is so typical, that you see the woman, you see the child, terrible things that Israel does. And it had the right effect as far as Hamas was concerned. There was outrage throughout the world at this, what Israel had done. They had sent a precision missile and knocked out one particular room in a block of flats because they knew there were some terrorists there. And this family with some children was in the room below, and the effect of the blast was such that it did kill the children. It was very sad, but that is one of the consequences of war. But Hamas made it look as if Israel was terrible. I say that there was a worldwide outcry against Israel. The United Nations, Europe, Britain even, and America all were so against what Israel was doing. This cruelty to the children that wasn't really the situation at all. And it doesn't matter what death tolls there are in other countries. What the BBC concentrates on is Israel. And I've got a book. It's actually dealing with the BBC much earlier in time, but it's called The Biased Broadcasting Company. But they will jump on anything that puts Israel in a bad light. Yet there's no other country in the world that helps its enemies like Israel does. Prior to going in and destroying a building, they will warn the people in the area. They'll drop leaflets in Hebrew and in Arabic. They will send mass text messages to people they know that are living in the area. How they know all their numbers, I don't know, but we know the skills that Israel has. And so they will be warned, and they will even go to the extent of tapping the roof. They have a special kind of bomb which will just give a few knocks on the roof to indicate to the people in there, get out, this building is being marked to be destroyed. Now, you can't do any more than that. But the problem is that Hamas very often will not let these people leave. As far as Hamas is concerned, every casualty is victory to them because they know the outcry that will come instantly from the world. Whereas Israel's philosophy is life is very precious. No other army in the world does what Israel does, warning its enemies it's going to attack and when it's going to attack. And it is so, BBC is just so biased. It accepts Hamas's casualty figures, yet many times they've been shown to be totally false. And people who have examined them have shown that mathematically they just don't add up. And remember, there are no Hamas casualties. And yet we know that many Hamas fighters have been killed. Why are there no Hamas casualties in these figures? Because they're counted by Hamas as civilians. So you see Israel has killed all these thousands of people, but many of them are terrorists. And the other thing is that children are classed as children until they reach the age of 18. Well, they reach the age of 19. So up to 18, you are classed as a child. Well, we know that youngsters are sent to summer camps from the age of 15 to be trained as fighters. And dying for the cause is absolutely glorified. It's glorified in the schools. It's glorified in these summer camps. And there are all these virgins waiting in heaven, waiting for the martyrs. It's a sick game that Hamas plays, and it works. So, I don't know why that heading is there. Have I got a duplicate slide? Yeah. I want to now turn and look at Israel and the military. There has been an amazing change in the Israeli army in the past few months. Netanyahu knew from the beginning that there was going to be a great battle against Hamas, and the only solution was to get rid of Hamas. If Hamas is allowed to live, then there will be further trouble down the line. That's what Israel had done in the past. They called it mowing the grass. So when there was trouble, back 10 years, 5 years ago, they would deal with it, but they knew that Hamas would regroup and it will start all over again. Because that was left-wing thinking. Netanyahu's right-wing thinking is there's only one solution. Hamas have to be eliminated. Otherwise, it will all be in vain, all these sacrifices that have been made by the young Israeli soldiers. And unfortunately, the Israeli army was deeply influenced by the left-wing philosophy, which ran completely counter to Netanyahu's right-wing thinking. Nevertheless, Netanyahu has succeeded against the odds to make the Israeli army a feared unit among his foes. Hamas does their best to thwart him. Hezbollah are totally afraid to provoke him. Syria doesn't stop Israel going over and bombing old weapon stores to make sure that they can't be used, because the Syrian weapons were very fearful, a lot of chemical weapons. So Israel, when their intelligence finds a site where the weapons have been stored, she sends her planes in and destroys them. Syria can't do anything. And Iran could only watch powerlessly when Israel took command of the Iranian skies earlier in the year. So I just want to conclude this section by looking at the Palestinian state, the myth of the Palestinian state. Certain conditions have to be met in order for a country to call itself a state. There is no state of Palestine. Hamas is the occupying power. Remember, Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2006. Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, took over for about a year. And then Hamas, the elections were called, Hamas won, and so Fatah was eliminated as Hamas took over control of Gaza. And absolutely brutal. They would torture any Hamas, any Fatah person they found, and then take them up to the top of flats and throw them over. Absolutely brutal. Now, the special thing about the refugees in Gaza is that they are the only group of refugees in the world that are run by a special agency. It's a UN one, who keep them as permanent refugees. In all other camps, what happens is the people in the camp integrate with the country where they are, and then the camps can be closed, but not in Gaza. Ever since 1948 and the war there, when this camp was set up to house the refugees that had fled from their homes because they were told by the Arab states that we're going to wipe Israel off the map, so please get out the way, you go down there and you'll be safe down there, and when we've wiped Israel off the map, then you can come back to your homes. Well, we know that didn't happen. That wasn't God's will. And Israel emerged victorious. And so there were all these refugees left in this camp, in these camps in Gaza. And they're kept as permanent refugees. This is a unique United Nations operation. As I say, it doesn't apply to any other ones. And so the numbers have absolutely grown because they can't leave, they can't be absorbed into a neighbouring country. And so the numbers just grow and grow and grow. And what we have to remember that is in 1948, it was Jordan that illegally took over most of the land of Israel that had been allocated to them by the United Nations in 1947. And there was never any talk of a state for the Palestinians. It seems that Arab nations have an absolute hatred of the people living in Gaza. Egypt won't lift a finger, Jordan won't lift a finger, Syria won't lift a finger to help them. They're stuck there for life. The other thing is that anti-Semitism is rife in the Middle East. Israel's the only democratic state in the Middle East. It's only one way you have elections and people can decide, whether they vote left or right. But in none of the other countries are there democratic governments. So there is this feeling in the Middle East that Israel is a problem because their people say, well, why can't we be like Israel? How the Arabs in Israel have flourished. They've become rich. They've got posh houses, posh cars, and here we are in poverty. So that is a problem for the surrounding Arab countries. Right. So, warnings for the Ecclesia. What we have to remember is it's not too late to turn our lives around. You see, I think there's going to be a great problem for the Brotherhood. We are on a high because of what is happening at the moment, all these things is coming to pass. And then I believe that we're going to see, because Israel will be victorious, she is able to dictate her terms to the nations around, that we'll have a time of peace and safety. How long it will last, how much of that we'll see, I don't know. The fact that the Bible tells us that there is to be a time of peace and safety indicates to me that, yes, we shall see at least the beginning of it. So if suddenly the limelight is taken off the situation there, then I think our community is going to say, well, we're all buoyed up. Nothing has happened. And that's going to be a great test for our community. Because at the moment we have freedom of worship, don't we? We live in a country where we're allowed to meet together and discuss things, but we already know that there are various fields where we have to be very careful what we advertise our lecture titles as, because of the police will investigate, and we could get into trouble. And we know from Scripture that at the time of the end, problems in the world are only going to increase. So I think there's going to be a time of great problem and great trouble for the world. And we as a community could face conscription. It's being talked about in Germany. And of course that won't just affect the brethren, it'll affect the sisters as well, such as the heritage of the, I've forgotten the name of the movement, but you know what I mean, that everybody is equal. And so that would mean anybody from the age of 18 to retirement age, 65 at the moment, would have to face a tribunal, a hostile tribunal. It won't be nice, friendly ones as we had in World War II. These will be very hostile interrogators. Why aren't you fighting for your country? And what's going to be our reply? They'll have access to all our email account, Facebook accounts and things like that. And I'll say, well, you supported this group and that group, and you said this and that about yourself. How does that marry up with what you're now saying, that I'm a conscientious objector? I don't know if this is going to take place, but it's something we need to be very aware of. And a lot of people are now pulling off from the web all the things that they have put, because we've got to be seen, as Brother Mike has been telling us, that we're different. We're just passing through this country. We are pilgrims and strangers. Our aim is the kingdom of God. And when the Lord Jesus comes, yes, we'll fight for him, but not for the rulers of this world. So we've got to make sure, brothers and sisters, we have filled our minds with the oil of the Word of God, and made that our central core, in order, in the mercy of God, that when we stand before our Master, he will grant us a place in his kingdom. How thankful we will be to have that mercy shown to us. But, as Mike has been saying, if we don't show mercy to our brothers and sisters, how can we expect Jesus to be merciful to us? We've got to put the truth into practice. So we pray that in the mercy of God, we may be found worthy to join our Master, to set right the wrongs of this world, to make Israel recognise their Messiah, whom they've rejected for 2,000 years, and bring peace and blessing to this troubled earth.
Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment in the comment section and let us know what you thought. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Please share it and spread the word. Thanks for watching, and remember to come back soon.